The price of silver is set in a handful of vaults under London, and those vaults are quietly running out of metal that anyone is actually allowed to sell. Not running out of bars, running out of free bars. There is a difference, and that difference is the entire reason you are watching this video. If you own silver, or if you have been circling it and waiting for the perfect moment, what is happening inside those vaults right now is the single most important thing in your financial life that nobody on the evening business shows is going to explain to you. So let me honor the number that brought you here, and let me be straight with you about it. The urgency in that title is real, but it is not about a clock on the wall. It is about a shelf. Here is the fact you can chew on before we go one step further. The headline totals for silver sitting in the London vault sound enormous, but the overwhelming share of that metal is already spoken for. It belongs to exchange-traded funds. It sits against allocated accounts. It is somebody's property, part, not for sale. What is actually free to trade, what the industry calls the free float, is a thin sliver of the headline number, and analysts who track it have been warning that it has been drawn down to levels that leave very little cushion. The price you see quoted is being set off that thin sliver. That is why the honest answer to the title is this. Nobody can promise you what the screen prints in the next session, but the metal genuinely available at these prices is far scarcer than the big vault totals suggest, and markets priced off a nearly empty shelf do not tend to stay quiet. In my years around the gold and silver world, I have learned that the most dangerous number in any market is the one everybody trusts without asking what is behind it. The London Vault total is exactly that kind of number. The financial press quotes it like a fortress, thousands of tons of silver sitting safe under the city. And technically, the bars are there. You could walk the rows and touch them. But a vault is not a store. Most of what is in it cannot be sold at any price, because it already has an owner with a claim stamped on it. Let me make that real for you, because I think one man's working life explains it better than any analyst report. Picture a fellow named Dale, a retired hotel maintenance chief from Branson, Missouri. He spent his career keeping a big property on the strip running, boilers and chillers, and 300 rooms of plumbing, up before sunrise walking the mechanical floors with a flashlight and a clipboard. And Dale will tell you the first lesson of that job, the inventory sheet lies. The sheet might say the parts room holds 40 motors, but 30 of them are already tagged for scheduled jobs, promised to work orders that are coming whether you like it or not. The number that matters is not what is on the shelf. It is what is on the shelf and not spoken for. Because when a boiler goes down on a full house in peak season, the tag motors might as well not exist. Dale learned to keep two numbers in his head, the sheet number and the real number, and to only ever trust the second one. The London silver market is Dale's parts room at the scale of the entire world. The sheet number is the headline vault total, and it looks comfortable. The real number is the free float, the unencumbered metal that can actually meet a buyer. And by every serious estimate, that number has been worked down to a fraction of the headline, with much of what remains pinned under fund shares and allocated claims. When commentators wave at the big total and tell you there is plenty of silver, they are reading the sheet. The people who move physical metal for a living read the real number, and the real number is what has them quietly rearranging their affairs. We do not have to speculate about what happens when that thin cushion gets tested, because it already happened, recently, in plain sight. Not long ago, the London market hit a stretch where the free float got so tight that the market seized up. The cost of borrowing silver, which is normally a sleepy, almost invisible fee, exploded. Dealers scrambled. Metal had to be pulled in from other markets just to keep the plumbing working. It was a warning shot, the vault equivalent of the boiler making a sound Dale knows means trouble, and the analysts who watched it happen have been saying openly that the conditions for a repeat never went away. The shelf got restocked a little. It did not get restocked much. But here is where it gets stranger, and this is the part almost nobody follows through on. Ask the obvious question. When London ran short, where did the rescue metal come from? Two places, mostly. It came out of the exchange warehouses in New York, and it came out of China. Those were the relief valves. Now look at what has happened to those valves since. The New York Exchange stockpile of registered silver, the portion actually standing ready for delivery, was drawn down hard through a stretch of heavy delivery demand and has only partly rebuilt. And China, far from sending more metal west, has been pulling silver in. Its domestic price has been trading at a stiff premium over London, a gap far wider than shipping costs explain, which is a magnet dragging physical bars east. And on top of that, China has moved to restrict silver exports, choking off one of the key resupply channels to London entirely. So the market that nearly seized is now leaning on relief valves that are narrowing at both ends. That is the structure underneath the price in that title. Underneath the vault story sits an even older problem, And it is the reason the shelf cannot simply be restocked from the mines. The world has now run a structural silver shortfall for years on end, one annual deficit stacked on the next, with the accumulated gap widely reckoned to be close to a full year of global mine production. And mine supply cannot simply ramp to close it, because most silver does not come out of silver mines at all. It comes up as a side stream from operations dug for copper and zinc and lead, which means silver output answers to the economics of those metals, not to silver's price. Meanwhile, the demand side keeps eating. Solar panels, electronics, electrification, every one of them takes silver in, and almost none of it ever comes back. The old line in this business is that gold gets saved and silver gets spent, and I would put it to you even more plainly. Humanity stores its gold and consumes its silver, a few grams at a time, spread across a billion devices, where no recycler will ever profitably chase it. Now stack the history on top, because silver has been here before, and the pattern is worth knowing. Twice in the modern era, silver has run to around the $50 mark, once in 1980 and again in 2011, roughly 3 decades apart, and both times it was turned away. That means beneath the recent move sits something like a 45-year base. And here is the detail that reframes everything. If you take that 1980 peak and restate it in the purchasing power of current dollars, you get a 3-figure silver price, comfortably above 100, a level silver has never reclaimed in real terms. So when silver works its way into the low 60s after breaking that old ceiling, the mainstream calls it expensive. Measured against its own history, adjusted for what a dollar actually buys now, it is still trading at a deep discount to where it has already been. And that is not even the biggest piece. Watch the relationship between the two metals. Gold has been the star of this cycle, pressing record territory in the low to mid 4,000s, driven by buyers we will get to in a minute. Silver, after its long climb, has lagged gold's latest leg, and the ratio between them has widened out again. Now, in my time watching these markets, I have seen what that setup preceded before. In the great metals run of the 1970s, silver spent the early years trailing behind gold, the forgotten little brother, right up until the late innings, when it turned and compressed that ratio with a violence gold never matched, doing in months what gold had needed years to do. I am not promising a rerun. I am telling you that a lagging silver price against a record gold price is not historically a signal of weakness. It has more often been the coiling before the move. Now, let us name who benefits from you never thinking about any of this. The silver price is discovered mostly on paper, in futures and unallocated accounts, where the claims trading hands each session dwarf the deliverable ounces behind them by multiples. The big trading desks earn their living on that churn, and a retail holder who panics out of physical metal during an engineered-looking shakeout is, frankly, their favorite kind of customer. If you want proof that the paper price and the physical metal are not the same thing, you only need one episode. In the panic of March 2020, the New York futures price of gold tore loose from the London physical price, an event the professionals politely called a dislocation, and it set off a scramble of chartered planes and emptied vaults to stitch the two back together. Rare moments like that pull the curtain back. The paper market is a promise. The vault is the fact. And the whole thesis of this video is that the facts in the vault are running thin while the promises multiply. Which brings me to the lesson I most want you to take from this decade, because governments learned it before you did. A few years back, one of the largest countries on Earth woke up to find its national reserves, hundreds of billions held as balances in Western institutions, switched off. Frozen. Not stolen at gunpoint, just turned off, because those reserves were never really things. They were promises on someone else's ledger. And every central bank on the planet watched it happen and drew the same conclusion. A reserve that exists as another party's promise can be revoked, but metal sitting in your own vault answers to no one. Their gold buying accelerated from that moment and has run at a historic pace since. Now bring that home to your own retirement. If a superpower savings can be a switch someone else controls, ask what your savings are. A brokerage balance is an entry in an institution's database. A fund share is a claim on a claim. There is nothing wrong with owning those things, but there is something wrong with owning only those things, and the people who run nations have already voted on that question with their reserves. This is exactly why we put together the free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide, and I want to be clear that this is not just for insiders or the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is for you. It walks you through, in plain English, how American retirees are diversifying a portion of their savings into physical gold and silver inside the retirement account they already have, a 401k or an IRA, without taxes and without penalties, using a self-directed precious metals IRA. It is completely free, from our family to yours. No obligation, nothing to buy. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. Now, back to the market, because there is a piece of positioning data that changes how you should read this whole move. When regulators publish the breakdown of who holds what in the futures market, the pattern lately is telling. The fast money funds, the trend chasers who pile in at tops, are carrying a historically light position in silver. This rally has not been their party. Meanwhile, the commercial players sit short as they perpetually do, and the price has held its ground anyway. Why does that matter to you? Because tops are made when the speculative crowd is all in and there is nobody left to buy. That is not the current picture, and it matches what I would call the mania checklist from 1980, which I keep taped to the inside of my skull. At that top, there were lines out the door at coin dealers, families melting down grandmother's flatware, the price gapping day after day, everybody's brother-in-law suddenly an expert. Run down that list against this stretch. The lines are absent. The flatware is safe in the drawer. Institutional portfolios still hold a historically tiny allocation to metals. Whatever inning this is, it does not resemble the last one. Now for the part 1OU, because trust is built on the caveat, not the pitch. I cannot tell you the number and that title holds through the next session, and neither can anyone else. And you should walk away from anybody who says otherwise. Tight physical markets can stay tight for a long time without the price exploding. Exchanges can raise margin requirements, and history shows what that does. In 2011, a rapid series of margin hikes knocked silver down by roughly a third in a matter of days, while nothing about the physical shortage changed. A broad market panic can drag every asset down together for a stretch. Silver is violent in both directions, and a squeeze deferred can look, for months at a time, like a thesis that failed. What I can tell you is what the structure says. A multi-year supply deficit, a London free float drawn to the bone with the remainder spoken for, resupply channels narrowing, and light speculative positioning. That is a case, a strong one in my judgment, but a case is not a guarantee, and none of this is personal financial advice. The honest version of the warning is not that the price changes at midnight. It is that the conditions letting you exchange paper dollars for scarce physical metal at these levels are the anomaly, and anomalies close. But watch what happens when you widen the lens beyond silver, because the metal is leaving more than one shelf. Central banks have been buying gold at a pace with no modern precedent, north of 1,000 tons a year for several years running, roughly twice the rhythm of the previous decade, and the buying picked up speed after that reserve freeze we talked about. Gold has now climbed past the euro to stand as the second largest reserve asset on Earth, behind only the dollar itself. And follow the physical flows. Metal has been migrating out of Western vaults toward the east for years, while China builds out its own parallel infrastructure, new vaults, its own benchmarks, its own clearing, and Hong Kong expands storage capacity many times over. The nations accumulating metal are simultaneously building the plumbing to price it and settle it without London and New York. You do not build a second set of pipes unless you expect someday to use them. Let me take you back to Dale in Branson, because his story has a second chapter, and it is the one that matters for you. The sheet versus shelf lesson was his working life, but the decision came after, when he retired with his 401k. The savings from decades of before-dawn call-outs and holiday shifts while the guests slept. Dale did what he had always done. He audited the inventory. He looked at his statements and asked his old question. How much of this is actually mine, on my shelf, untagged? And how much is a promise on somebody else's ledger? And the answer unsettled him, because it was promises nearly all the way down. So he did what a maintenance chief does before the season rush. He did not panic, he did not sell everything, he simply moved a portion of what he had into the one asset class that is not anyone's promise, physical metal, held in his own retirement account, and he did it while things were calm. Dale's rule from the boiler room applies to your retirement exactly. You stock the critical spare before the failure, because after the failure, everyone wants the same part at the same time, and the price of it stops being the point. Availability becomes the point. So what do you actually do with your own position? Principles, not prescriptions. First, size any metal position so that no shakeout, however violent, can ever force you to sell it, because in silver, the shakeouts are a feature, not a bug. Second, in a market defined by a shrinking free float and multiplying paper claims, understand the difference between owning metal and owning a promise of metal, and know which one you hold. Third, never sell into the panic lows. That is precisely the moment the churn merchants are paid to manufacture. And fourth, decide in calm what you would do in chaos, because decisions made during the sirens are the expensive ones. Dale never once ordered the critical spare while the boiler was down. He ordered it in the quiet season, when nobody needed it yet and it was sitting there, available at list price. And here is the recognition I want to leave you with, because timing is really a question of who has noticed. The central banks noticed years ago, and their vault doors have been swinging inward ever since. The physical merchants of Asia noticed, and the premiums and export walls prove it. The analysts inside the bullion market noticed, which is why the free float warnings keep getting louder. Who has not noticed? The pension funds, the mainstream media, the neighbor who will eventually ask you how to buy silver. Right now, the shelf is thin, but the store is still quietly open. And that combination, scarcity that has not yet made the headlines, is the entire window. Once the average household understands what the free float is, the way you now do, that understanding will arrive all at once, the way it always does. And the prices available in the quiet stretch will belong to the people who acted during it. The advantage was never secret information. It was acting on public information a season before it became common knowledge. If anything in this video made you look differently at what is actually on your shelf, then take the one step that costs you nothing. Get the free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide. It was written for American retirees with $100,000 or more in a retirement account, and it shows you how to protect and diversify a portion of what you spent a lifetime building, and what your children and grandchildren will one day inherit, by moving a slice of it into physical gold and silver inside the account you already have. No taxes, no penalties. The self-directed route explained step by step. And for viewers with 100,000 or more who watch this whole video, mention that when you reach out, and you will also receive a free one-on-one educational web conference, a real conversation with a real person. No pressure and nothing to buy. From our family to yours. And the honest reason to do it now rather than someday, not because a deadline expires at midnight, but because the entire lesson of the London vaults is that the calm stretch is when the shelf still has stock on it. And calm is exactly what nobody ever thinks to use. If you are watching this on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. One more night, the title says. Maybe it is one, maybe it is many. No honest man will pretend to know the count. But under London, the rows of bars look as full as they ever did, and nearly every one of them now wears somebody's tag. Dale would glance at that shelf, check it against the sheet, and quietly go make sure his own critical spares were in hand before the season turned. The sheet number is for the headlines. The real number is for the people paying attention. Be one of them while it is still quiet enough to matter.